Good morning, everyone. I'll call the meeting of the State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council to order. Welcome everyone to Albany again. Again, with our apologies for the difficulties of the last attempted meeting. We appreciate you making the effort and the extra effort to be here today. Thank you very much. One quick announcement. After a fairly long hiatus, it's great to see Nick Altieri back on the Code Council. Mr. Altieri has been chosen to serve as a designee for Helen Hudson from the city of Syracuse. So we're very pleased to have you back. Look forward to your continued participation on the council. Let's take a roll call attendance, please. Mark.
Ron Peace, representing the Secretary of State.
Here.
Maria Guzzati, representing the Commissioner Peter Rivera.
Here.
John Lee, representing the Honorable Michael Bloomberg.
Here.
Nicholas Altieri, representing the Honorable Helen Hudson.
Here.
The Honorable Judith Kennedy.
Here.
We also have Michael Batter.
Here.
The Honorable William Tucker.
Here.
Gary Higbee.
Here.
John Flanagan.
Here.
Robert Hankin.
Here.
Joseph Sauerwein.
Here.
John Torpy.
Here.
Thomas Vanderbeek. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 2, the minutes from the July 16th, 2013 and September 11th, 2013 meetings. My understanding is that the July 16th meetings were in your packet for September, and the September 11th minutes of our lack of proceeding are in your current agenda folder. Does anybody have any questions or additions or corrections to the minutes?
Mr. Peaster?
Mr. Sauerwein?
Yes, Mr. Peaster, on page 5, about 2/3 of the way down, it states Joseph Sauerwein asked that the next submission include reasons for changes between what Brookhaven had and what Mastic Beach was proposing. I apologize for not being clear in my comments. What I really wanted was a comparison between what currently exists in the New York State Uniform Code and what Mastic Beach was proposing. Because I felt that many of the more restrictive local requirements that have been previously approved in Brookhaven have since been addressed in the Uniform Code. Again, I apologize for not being clear in the comments I made at that point.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that's for the July 16th minutes, correct?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a correction to the minutes. Does everyone understand the correction? Okay, any other comments or corrections to the minutes?
I have a question.
Mr. Hankin?
Question. If you correct those minutes, it will now not correspond with the transcription? Is that correct? If you make the change that Mr. Sauerwein is requesting, the minutes will not correspond to the transcription.
We would have to review the transcript, but Mike, do you have a comment that you'd like to make on that?
Sure, I can address that. The transcript is the transcript. That's a
Right.
legal recording. The minutes are how I interpreted and took it from it. So Mr. Sauerwein's apology was not necessary. It was obviously my mistake in going over it. So they will agree to the sense that whatever's in the transcript is there, but the minutes will now reflect the corrected, as Joseph said. And I don't know what the transcript said specifically. That's how I read it, though. I hope that explains it and doesn't confuse it more.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers the question.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or corrections? Okay. We need a motion up.
Is correct.
Yeah. Okay, let's take I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes as corrected by Mr. Sauerwein. Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Flanagan, the second by Mayor, July 16th, the second by Mayor Kennedy. Let's take discussion on the motion. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a vote on the motion to approve the July 16th minutes as corrected by Mr. Sauerwein. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Thank you. September 11th, 2013 minutes. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor accept the motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Mr. Flanagan. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Hankin. Discussion on the motion. Okay, we'll take a vote on the motion to approve the September 11th minutes. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Public comment period. Mark?
We have 7 people who signed up to give comments during the public comment period part of the agenda. 3 of them are going to speak on the Village of Mastic Beach, which is agenda item 4. So we're going to take 4 speakers for agenda item 3, beginning with John McBride, the International Association of Electrical Inspectors.
Okay. For the speakers, we're going to ask you to keep your comments limited to 5 minutes. And if you have additional information that you'd like to present to the council, you're welcome to present written comments to the council. Okay?
Thank you. Good morning. I've asked to address the council in further considering the updated adoption of the National Electrical Code. Presently, it's 2008, and I know in previous meetings of your council, you've discussed updating and adopting a more current standard for use in the New York State building and residential codes. I have 2 letters that I will submit for your consideration, further consideration and review. I'll basically read both of them, not in entirety, but there's some critical points there. The National Electrical Code, NFPA 70, has been the U.S. standard for safe electrical installations since 1897, and is the country's most universally recognized and adopted construction safety standard. Since 1911, the nonprofit National Fire Protection Association has been the sponsor and publisher of the NEC, and it has been revised on a regular 3-year revision cycle since 1959. The purpose of the NEC is simple. Every requirement within this standard is focused on the practical safeguard of persons and property from hazards arising from the use of electricity. The use of electrical power in homes, businesses, institutions, and other locations is vital within our society, and with the necessary safeguards, it has proven to be a catalyst for better lifestyles and for economic development. Each edition of the NEC reflects the state of technology and industry safety concerns at the time that edition was revised. The requirements in each subsequent edition of the NEC build on the foundation created by all of the preceding editions of the NEC. Reviewing the requirements contained in the 52 editions of this standard is a historical account of how electrical power has been safely distributed and controlled within our homes, businesses, and institutions. The 3-year revision cycle allows sufficient time to thoroughly vet proposed changes to the document through the NFPA codes and standards development process. But it is not too long so as to be a barrier to timely introduction of advances in technology and new electrical products into the marketplace with the proper safety requirements established. As electrical product and delivery technology evolves, so too do the challenges of safe integrating the technology into our electrical systems. Skipping an addition of the NEC will in many cases preclude the opportunity to take advantage of new wiring methods that may be safer and more cost-effective to install, of new equipment that allows for a safer interface with devices that deliver electrical power, of new devices that further the fire and shock protection mission of the code, and of new electrical power production sources such as solar and wind systems. Electrical power for automobiles is a rapidly emergency technology, but must be implemented with the necessary safeguards. Again, the NEC has risen to meet the challenge so that safety regulations support rather than obstruct increased use of electrically powered automobiles. The changes in the NEC 2011 are all focused on advancing electrical safety, and most can be placed into one of the following categories. Examples are provided for each of these major categories. Protecting homes from fires of electrical origin. Protecting people from electric shock in homes and workplaces. Protecting electrical workers while maintaining or servicing electrical or electrical powered equipment. Advancing new wiring methods and practices. Keeping the current with industry trends in delivery and generation of electric power. Keeping the regulatory document current with trends in new technology. These examples illustrate the importance of regularly updating the National Electrical Code in order to recognize new methods and installation practices for safely distributing electrical power, to address safety concerns not previously covered in the code, and to put new generation, distribution, and management of electrical power. This is the work performed during the revision process by volunteer industry subject matter experts who serve on the NFPA technical committees. Making sure the NEC is put into action is the job of those responsible for adopting codes and standards that regulate construction. The NEC has been used by the regulatory community for over 100 years, with a proven track record of meeting society's demand for safe electrical installations. Adopting the most current edition of the NEC is a vitally important and proactive step for consumer protection and for the safe advancement of new electrical system technology. Sincerely, John McBride. And I have one other short letter. Folks, we are writing you on behalf, I'm speaking to you on behalf of the IAEI, International Association of Electrical Inspectors, Adirondack chapter, to find out when you will adopt the NEC 2011 or the current NEC 2014 as a reference standard to the current New York State residential and building codes. Our organizations are tasked and engaged in educating New York State electrical contractors, inspectors, and building code officials to utilize the most up-to-date codes that have been developed and reviewed for this use. These codes are developed with high regard to personal and public safety. Should you have any questions regarding this correspondence, do not hesitate to contact me.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Who should I present these letters to?
Let's give them to Mike Auerbach, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, will you please introduce the next speaker?
Our next speaker is James Backus, speaking on the fire code.
Hello, my name is James Backus, and I'm from Endicott, New York. I'm here on behalf of my mother. I came back from Florida to act as her caregiver. She, at the time, was 85 years old and losing her memory, but still functional and I, being an only child, decided that this was the right time to come back. I was her caregiver until January 31st of this year, when Mom and I decided to go to the Cracker Barrel in Binghamton, New York on Front Street. It was a typical January 31st day, but when I got my mom to the door leading into the Cracker Barrel, I don't know if any of you people are familiar with the Cracker Barrel, how you enter the facility, but you go through a vestibule, a pair of doors, and a space between. And essentially, unbeknown to us, there was a mud carpet that had slid down to the back of the entry door and turned on. When I opened the door to let my mom in, she was on my right arm. Her first step wasn't on the carpet, but under the carpet, causing her to stagger, and she hit the door opposite wall with her forehead and broke 2 vertebrae in her neck, C1 and C2 vertebrae. Subsequently, I became very good friends with Mr. Blanca, and from conversation and everything, because what I noticed, I might add that my background is in architecture in Florida primarily, and have a pretty strong handle on codes and things like that. We don't have problems like mud carpets in Florida, but essentially this carpet was far smaller than the space that it was protecting and could move. Now, I don't know of any building code that addresses a moving floor. And essentially, this is what we experienced. Mom had a broken neck and never recovered. And she passed on the 19th of June. And I said on her grave that I wanted to at least come up here and discuss this with people to make things a little safer for the public. My mom's gone. The Cracker Barrel, because of the fact that my mom is 88 years old, I couldn't find any legal firm to take the case. There just isn't any money in it. But money isn't what I'm interested in. Money always is nice, but safety is basically what I have been trained to look at. And I just don't think that this was thought out very well in this particular condition. If any of you go to a Cracker Barrel, I'm sure that you understand what I'm saying when I talk about the vestibule. But when you get into a vestibule and you trip, there isn't a safe place to land. And by another obstacle, interfering with you. And I just wanted to address the council basically from the standpoint of a concerned citizen that would like things a little safer. And I think a clarification, the use of mud carpeting, ice carpeting, whatever. I would like to see it addressed, especially in vestibules. There just isn't a lot of room in those. And believe me, I know what can happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments. We're certainly sorry for the loss of your mother.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing the issue to our attention. Mark, would you please introduce the next speaker?
Mary Beth Baruda.
Hi, I was kind of a last minute thing because I just saw this online and I represent.
Ma'am, would you please, just for the record, state your name and any affiliation?
Yes, my name is Mary Beth Baruda and I'm from Columbia County, New York, and I run a venue called Apple Barn Farm.
Great, thank you.
I printed out 6 copies, so I don't know who gets the 6, because I didn't know what this was going to be about, but last night at the last minute, I just tried to prepare something to bring, because basically what's happening is in the state of New York, I don't know if you're very aware of it, but there are barns that run weddings. And I am one of them. And I was the first barn probably to be doing this kind of on a grand scale.
That run what?
Weddings.
Wedding.
We do weddings in a barn. Sorry, I don't have so many copies, but basically I just kind of did a little cover letter. Oh, okay, pass them around. Okay, there's a few of those. So basically, I was just trying to present the information that what's been brought to my attention July 15th. I've been doing this for 10 years. And on July 15th, my local town, Livingston, New York, I heard just through the grapevine there was going to be this meeting, and I'm like, I'm the last person to hear it, and I'm the first person to do this. And basically, they put this moratorium on because there was a neighbor of somebody who was running weddings in a tent, not in a barn. But because of that, it opened up a lawyer, it opened up what are the regulations, what are the codes, all this kind of thing. So basically, they put this moratorium down, and they said, the town of Livingston said, we don't, no booking any weddings, we're going to have to stop this. I would go and get it. I got a variance. I presented to the town what my plan was. This is going on 10 years. Basically, I bus the wedding guests in. I bus the wedding guests out. I have 3 restrooms. I have a porta-john that comes in. I do basically fairly small events. It's in a barn that was built in the 1700s. I have fire exits. I have a big, huge door. Basically, they were happy with the plan I presented, and things have been great up until this just opened up. So what I decided was, I'm trying to figure out, how do you make a barn fit any kind of fire code or building code? I got an engineer to come out who worked for the state of New York, Charlie Vianney, and basically he came into the barn and he looked at it, because I can't sit here and wait for my town board to figure out what's going on, because I have weddings booked next year. People don't book their wedding in January for June. People book their wedding a year in advance. So I'm trying to make heads or tails of all this, and I don't know if anybody knows what they're doing or what's going on. So I said, I need to come up here and I need to give you guys the information and forget about the little town, because my town wants me to do this. Columbia County has, in the town of Livingston alone, there are 4 barns that have weddings on probably the same day. So of course the town has to address their own issues, but basically, I bus people. I have something that's going good. I've never had a problem in 10 years in any way, shape, or form, but in learning this information, I know that my barn cannot meet any kind of code. Charlie Vianney came out, he looked at it, he said, no, this is a safe structure, this is great, but it won't meet any business code or any fire code. And he said basically that because it's considered a gathering place, because there's 50 people or more in it, it therefore puts it as a commercial building, which of course it's an agricultural building. There's no heat, there's no, nothing that would make it any kind of commercial or business building. It's a barn.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think you may have found the wrong venue to present your views.
right.
This, what I'd like to offer to you is our staff, actually on the 11th floor, this building could help you to understand the applicability of the state fire
But
prevention.
doesn't
and
this
building
deal
code.
with the uniform code?
This would be, this body does not have the ability to provide assistance or relief to you or other property owners. This body is actually responsible for promulgating and maintaining the building code. So this would be to actually, you would need to propose to change the building code, the state building code, if that's what you wanted to do. If you're looking for relief to the situation that you currently have, you need to speak with our staff in the codes division.
I mean, what I thought through the research I found was that the uniform code, that you have to get a group of people that will come together and then present the information to the state of New York where they'll look at the code. Because obviously, a barn is an agricultural building, but because we're having people meet in a barn, it changes the,
There is currently a proposal that has been developed by the Code Council that would address the temporary use of certain types of buildings, similar to the situation that you have. So there, again, there is a proposal
I was
that's
told
under
it was
development.
denied. I was told that this was already presented and that it was turned down.
That is incorrect. So, if you'd like to make additional comments, certainly give you a few more minutes.
I mean, I just wanted to present how much money that, I gave, there's 53 barns in the state of New York that I know of that are doing this. And there's an awful lot of money here. It's agritourism at its best. It's something big. It's not something small. It's something that affects a lot of people. Not just in my town, but up and down the Hudson River Valley. Up in the, I found barns that aren't even in the Hudson Valley. And there's many people that are doing this because farms can't afford to pay their taxes and run. And if they've got a beautiful old barn and they all saw me doing this, they've all just started popping up all over the place. So I just feel that there needs to be a concentrated effort to look at what we have going on here. And when the information was told to me by my building inspector coming in and telling me that I can't have a chafing dish on a porch, not even in my barn, to heat my food, and a lot of things like this, I'm like, this just seems crazy when there are little churches in these little towns that are gathering places that have people coming in, congregations of more than 50 every Sunday, and I know those buildings don't meet fire code. It's just impossible. So, to say that you're going to try to make a barn meet a fire code, I just feel like there really needs to be a special committee really just on this problem to really look at it, and that's all I was coming to do, was to present you with information for that.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you for the information. Thank you.
And where could I go from here? I would go to where?
I'm going to ask if there's someone from the Codes Division that could take her up to see Joe McGrath.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hankin?
In the context of the new code revision we're going through right now, this, I think, should be one of the items to be possibly discussed in the context of that. And if we do look to develop something to address this potential problem, or this problem, while it doesn't give her any short-term relief, I think it behooves her and whoever else is interested to get involved in that discussion so that when we come out with the newer code edition, possibly we've gone some way towards resolving the problem.
Again, this is something that the Code Council discussed and addressed before, developed a rule that would address the temporary use of buildings. It is currently under review, and we are preparing to submit to the governor's office for review to go into rulemaking that would address this specific issue. So it is something that has been developed. Mayor Kennedy?
Do you have a copy of that new rule? How do we get a copy of that particular rule?
We can provide copies. Again, we'll provide, this is something that predated your
Right, I
appointment to the
understand.
code council. We'll certainly, brief you on the status of that rule. We'll be happy to do that. Okay?
Ron, if I may.
Joe?
The draft of the rule is currently being reviewed by staff and the code council, the codes division. So there may not be a draft currently ready for circulation. Hopefully there will be very soon.
It's probably not a discussion item for today, but as I listen to this lady speak, I can't remember your name?
Mary Beth.
Mary Beth speak. It brings up a lot of the issues about doing business in New York. And what does that mean? And how do you support businesses in New York and farms in New York and so forth? So I am very interested to understand exactly what you've created as the word, the meaning of temporary, and how does that fit this sort of venue, as well as maybe some other temporary venues. So I'm very interested in what that's about.
The rule that was developed and is currently under review by our office was developed jointly with the Department of Agriculture and Markets. So it's something that is specifically intended to address situations just like you.
Thank you. I just wanted to know something was happening. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mark, we have one more speaker, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In our Buffalo location, we have Sam Khalil speaking on the fire code. Sam Khalil in Buffalo?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this has to pertain, first of all, my name is Sam Khalil, Buffalo, New York, and this has to, I'm here to address the fire code, section 2505, outside storage of tires, and specifically it's 2505.4, distance between lot lines and buildings. It states that tire storage piles should be located at least 50 feet from lot lines and buildings. My thing is, it's not specifically saying what a pile is. It's not defining how much tires is a pile, because technically 2 tires can be a pile. And to ask of 50 feet between buildings and lot lines, you practically need a huge real estate. And so I've spoken to a couple of high-ranking officials, and some of them say this doesn't apply to retail tire shops. This has to do with huge tire manufacturing facilities. It's just impossible to have 50 feet of space between lot lines and buildings to store tires. The way my tires are set up, they're on racks and they're for sale. They're not in piles or nothing like that. So the local inspector is pretty harsh on some of these local tire shops, and we're all going through a similar situation right now. And I've been on public forums and I've been researching this for several months already, and there's no clear interpretation of what tire piles is considered. And I think this should be fixed because it's affecting a lot of tire shops. Initially, they said the city granted us permission to have containers, steel containers outside the lot, which we can store tires in. But now they don't want that anymore, so it's just they're not giving us any leeway. They're saying that it's considered outside storage if it's inside trailers. I don't know how that can be. Section 902 of the code, I'm looking for a clear definition. The closest I can get is bulk storage of tires, which are tires in the available area exceeding 20,000 cubic feet. So is that considered the pile, something that's over 20,000 cubic feet, or what? It's not being specific, and I think this should be addressed. I looked at the California Uniform Code, and they have exceptions underneath that specific code. So it says tire storage piles containing less than 500 tires shall be permitted, no closer than 10 feet. So I looked at other states, and they all have exceptions except New York State. I mean, it's not clear cut of what tire piles are considered. Because technically a pile A pile is defined as tires stacked on top of each other, anything that's stacked on top of each other. So I want to know if this can be clarified.
Thank you for your comments. If you have questions about the uniform code, which sounds like you obviously do, I would encourage you to speak with our regional field staff who are in the Buffalo office, Andy Bizdak or Kumar Vijay Kumar, both of whom can help to answer your questions.
I actually did, and like I said, there's different interpretations because it's not specific.
And if you'd like a more specific interpretation, they will give you instructions on how you can request an interpretation from our office. Again, the State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council is not the venue for requesting interpretation of the state code.
Well, I'm just asking if they can make it more clearer, because it's just it's not specific enough. You got inspectors saying yes, you got inspectors saying no, so it's really up to someone's personal preference.
Again, we'll if you'd like to propose a change to the code, then they can help you to understand what you would need to do to submit a request to amend the state code, and that's certainly something that you're welcome to do. But it's not something that we would actually discuss today without a specific proposal.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for your comments.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, I would like to acknowledge
Flanagan.
it's January 29th of this year, an interpretation done by Cheryl Fisher of your office, tires stored in a rack outside shop and for sale. There is an interpretation already.
Thank you.
Yeah, she initially ruled in my favor and then recanted her decision. So that's why I'm saying there's no clear. It's not cut and dry.
If you want to make a comment.
I just wanted to make one comment, and that is, there is a difference between advice given by the code staff and a code interpretation. Code interpretation is specifically authorized by the statute and is more formal and binding than this. And if the gentleman wishes a code interpretation, that's why Ron suggested he contact the regional staff members in Buffalo for further information on how to do that. They can also provide him with further information on how to file an appeal of a determination made by a local code enforcement official. They can provide him with information on how to file a request for a variance, if the variance is something that he needs. And they will also provide him information on how to submit information that the Codes Division can distill and present to the Code Council in connection with proposed amendment, change, new language for the code itself that could be included the next time the code is updated.
Okay, thank you, Joe. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 4, more restrictive local standards. We have 2 petitions before us today. The first we'll take is the Village of Mastic Beach, local laws number 3, 4, and 5 of 2013. Mark, I'll ask you to introduce the agenda item and then introduce, I believe we have some guests from Mastic Beach at our New York City location.
Yes, we have 3 speakers for Village of Mastic Beach. This continues the Code Council's consideration of the more restrictive local standard in the Village of Mastic Beach, the discussion that we had at the July 16th meeting of the Code Council, in which they wish to enhance their fire, housing, and property maintenance standards. During that discussion in July, the Code Council became aware that many of the village's standards are very similar to that of the town of Brookhaven, which was approved by the Code Council back in the early 90s. And the Code Council was very interested in having a comparison done between the village and the town's requirements. At the meeting in July, there were 2 representatives from the village that agreed to provide the code council with a comparison between the two standards. They agreed to do that. They said they would do that by the then scheduled September 11th meeting of the code council. Prior to that meeting, we received a letter from the mayor, the Village of Massac Beach, asking the code council to delay their decision in the matter and asking that the code council delay it until the then next scheduled meeting, which was going to be December 11th. So that's what they're asking for, a delay in this decision until the December 11th. Now we have another meeting here on October 8th, only because the September 11th meeting was then canceled. The mayor also agreed not to enforce the more restrictive local standards until the December 11th meeting of the Code Council in hopes that they would address it at that time instead of now. So the highlights of the village's request, I went through that last July, but I'll go through it quickly again.
Okay.
Includes some language that requires an automatic sprinkler system in all new buildings over 10,000 square feet in area, and in all existing buildings over 10,000 square feet in area where more than 50% of the building is being modified or there's an addition proposed to that building. It goes on to also require retroactively a fire alarm system in all commercial buildings that are not equipped with an automatic sprinkler system. There's some language in there that gives the fire marshal the authority to write rules and regulations pertaining to liquefied petroleum gas and the storage and installation of them. There is a proposal, or not proposal, in their local law they have a requirement for habitable space to have a minimum ceiling height of 7 feet over at least 50% of the floor area, exactly the same as what we have already in the property maintenance code, except that in the property maintenance code we have an exception for those buildings that were legally constructed prior to January 1st of 2003, and the village's local law would basically eliminate that exception so that it would be retroactive to all buildings. In our property maintenance code, we have a requirement that limits the height of grass to more than 10 inches. The village's more restrictive local standard is proposing to reduce that to 8 inches. And those are the highlights. We have 3 speakers. I can go to them next or answer any questions that the Code Council may have.
Okay, let's go to the speakers, and I would ask that that at least for the purpose of your comments right now, that you limit your comments to your request to postpone to the December meeting, so that if the Code Council does decide to postpone the meeting until December, it would be most appropriate for you to make your full presentation at that time. So at this time, I would recognize representatives from the Village of Massac Beach to make some presentations on your request to postpone.
Our first speaker in New York City is Maura Sperry.
We wanted to know if we could just change the order a little bit, if that's okay. If we started with Jane Powers, went to Bruce Suma, and then to Maura Sperry, would that be okay?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Then we'll start
Great,
with
thank
Jane.
you.
We'll start with Jane Powers then.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jane Powers. I'm a resident of the Village of Massac Beach. Massac Beach has been a village for 3 years, and we're currently covered under the New York State Uniform Building and Fire Prevention Codes. I actually see no reason to change that. For 3 years, we've had 1 part-time fire marshal. This proposal, however, would take us from 1 part-time fire marshal to 1 full-time fire marshal, plus as many assistants as the fire marshal deems necessary. It's not clear to me why these changes are needed. We counted 90 businesses within the village boundaries. 18 of them are vacant, which would give us roughly a 20% vacancy rate. The village is citing a number of 60% and postulating that it makes it more dangerous and therefore We should have more fire marshals. Just think this proposal is grossly excessive for a community that's actually lost population due to the devastating effects of Superstorm Sandy. The formula seems to be less population, more fire marshals, and it makes no sense to me. The village actually is running a deficit budget this year. We're currently spending $500,000 more than we're taking in revenue. And so the idea of hiring that is so open-ended seems to be irresponsible as well as unnecessary. In his cover letter, the village attorney, Mr. Egan, states that the proposed fire codes mirror our former municipality. However, the town of Brookhaven does not arm its fire marshals, and there's no language in this proposal that would ban the arming of our fire marshals. That's very disturbing. Our community is basically on very small plots of land. It would be much safer to have an experienced police officer from our Suffolk County precinct, which is only 10 minutes up the road, wielding a gun when homes are that close together, than to have an inexperienced fire marshal doing so. And I'm very concerned about that. In the event that a fire marshal feels that he or she is walking into a dangerous situation, they can always call the Suffolk County Police, who can be there within a 10-minute period of time. I know that our village code enforcers have in the past asked for a police escort, and the Suffolk County Police have been very accommodating to that end. So I would like to see language in this proposal that prevents the arming fire marshals. I just don't think it's necessary. The second thing I'm concerned about is the lack of a grandfather clause that protects the owners of current homes and legally occupied businesses. It's something that our New York State Uniform Fire Prevention Code does at this time, and I would like to see some kind of a grandfather clause in there. The council should be aware that the village of Mastic Beach has already attempted to enforce the proposal they have in front of you last year. They demanded that a legally occupied business purchase the central station monitoring fire alarm system, even though the village code did not warrant this demand. The owner of the building refused because it would have cost him $15,000 to do so. That is the subject of pending a lawsuit at this time. The New York State Fire Prevention agents had to step in on 2 different occasions to open up this man's business and keep it open. He received an email on July 2nd that he was going to be closed to force compliance for a law that didn't exist yet. And he was to be closed on July 3rd. They kept him closed for 2 weeks. This is an ice cream parlor at the height of his business. The whole thing was done illegally. If this current proposal goes through without a grandfathering clause in there, it would allow the village to come in and close this business down again. Now, I know the village attorney, Mr. Egan, assures the council that this would not cause undue hardship to the village residents. However, if you have a business that's suddenly faced with closure and total loss of income, or a huge bill of $15,000, I would say he would beg to differ with that opinion. I would like to see a grandfather clause in there. I think it's very important to protect the businesses and to protect our homeowners. I'd like to thank the council so far in the last 3 years. The current code, the New York State Uniform building code and fire prevention seems to be working very well for our village. There's no clear reason to change it, and I would ask that you take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Introduce the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Bruce Suma.
Thank you, gentlemen, for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak. I would like to address the two letters sent to you by the village administrator and the fire marshal and correct some of the information in there. In the mayor's cover sheet, he says the conditions necessitating the approval of the housing standards are not self-imposed, rather they are due to demonstrated incidences observed by village personnel, as is proved in the accommodating narrative of the village's building inspector. Now, according to the narrative of Mr. Brozier, the building inspector, he says that we are a waterfront community made up of small lots and old summer cottages, which is true on the South Shore of Long Island. These lots along with the occupied lots pose a threat to the village. The village of Mastic Beach has 7,500 parcels, 5,500 structures, and he feels that nearly half of these structures are rental homes, where the 2010 census says 25% of the structures are rental homes. In the next paragraph, regarding the request for a grass height, half of our property in Mastic Beach are wetlands. We are not allowed, like my personal property has 20% wetlands, 8-foot Phragmites grass. The example that he's citing in this on the April 27th incident on which a big fire happened, first off, no homes were destroyed. The worst that happened to a home was vinyl siding melted. There was a fire on the Phragmites grass. We're not allowed to cut that. So I don't have a problem with an 8-inch limitation or a 4-inch limitation on lawn grass, but it doesn't exempt Phragmites grass, which is protected by the DEC. Let's see. The other thing that we're dead set against is the exemption, eliminating the exemption for houses built before 2003. My house is a 600 square foot bungalow. Before it was destroyed in Hurricane Sandy, it had more than 50% with a ceiling under 7 foot. If you were to put this law in, not only my house is covered now. My ceilings are cathedral. I have a new house. But there are many people, seniors included, who live in these houses that will be targeted unfairly. This should be taken into consideration. We're begging the council not to allow the elimination of the exemption for houses built before 2003. The fire marshal, in his narrative, speaking of which, going back to grass fires, we haven't had brush fires down there since the 90s when we had a young man, Stanley, I don't remember his last name. He was my wife's brother-in-law's nephew. His maiden name was Hanson. He was an arsonist. He was 17 years old. He was burning Mastic Beach. You can research that. But we don't have a problem with fires. Our vacancy rate, as Jane said, is 20%. We have 90 commercial buildings. 20 are empty. 18 are empty. So I don't see why we need tons of fire marshals to police this. We had one fire which took down an adjacent building this year, and we haven't had any fires in the commercial district in 20, 30 years. We have a fabulous fire department. All these restrictions are designed to target people and generate revenue. There is no problem with the fire code in the state of New York, and there's no reasons for these exemptions to be eliminated or for any more restrictive measures to be put in. The second half of the fire marshal's commentary about how people are going to die from, let's say, the fire will spread until it is discovered. If it is a vacant building or after normal business hours or the people are sleeping, he's talking about commercial buildings. We don't have second-story buildings on Neighborhood Road where there are apartments above it. So nobody is sleeping in the vacant building anyway, unless they're doing it totally illegally, which doesn't make any sense. But we would like to point out those inconsistencies, ask you not to approve the office of the fire marshal as well with his additional fire marshals. This is just subterfuge or little more than a police force. They tried to arm the code enforcement agents back after Hurricane Irene. That failed. They are trying to create a department of armed fire marshals. Why else do you need more than one part-time fire marshal for 5,500 homes? I don't understand it. If you look at our fire records, we're not Detroit. We're not burning 3 to 4 times a day. Do we have more than 2 or 3 fires a week if we have that many? And we have a great fire department. Thank you for letting me address the council today.
Thank you for your comments. Mark?
Our last speaker is Morris Berry.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come speak before you. I also live in Mastic Beach Village. I want to bring up first that in our village we are a very working class, low income community. We, I believe 2 years ago, had a 12% school tax increase. The year before was 8%. So in those 2 years, we had a 20% increase in our school taxes, which is most of our property tax. That was the largest increase in New York State. And we're a very low-income, poor community. We also had the largest amount of home foreclosures and predatory lending. So what we're looking at is a very, very in-need community. We are speaking on behalf of a number of seniors and people who are working 2 jobs, and the problem is that our code enforcement is acting like the Wild West. Mastic Beach Village, originally we were told if we voted this village in, they were just going to enforce the town of Brookhaven's code more effectively. They said over and over again they would not be making new, more onerous codes on the people in Mastic Beach. And as you can see by the large amount of pages in all of these local laws, that's not the case. I'd like to point out that the Village Hall at 427 Neighborhood Road is rented from a man by the name of Tommy Farah. One of the first things the village did was put in a trailer. It's not a permanent trailer. It was put in without a permit. The chief building inspector at that time told them they had to get a permit. He was let go. So he was let go. Tim Brozier, our new building inspector, even though he was told repeatedly they needed a permit, has never gotten a permit. There has never been a permit at Village Hall for this trailer, so they don't even follow your code for their own village. And this is just a slight example. One of their main benefactors has a 40-ton crane on his residential property, which is against 4 different village codes. He was reported months ago. The crane remains there, yet other people who have a commercial van for their tile company receive 10 tickets for the same thing. So what we have is a very unfair, very, like I said, Wild West interpretation of the law. We are extremely concerned in Mastic Beach with these guys getting more power than they already have. We feel that the New York State Fire Prevention Code is more than effective in protecting us in Mastic Beach. We feel that the codes from the town of Brookhaven that they want to continue using is perfectly fine. We've lived fine under that. We feel that Mastic Beach Village needs to prove that they're able to comply with some of the most basic laws and regulations, and I really want to point out that the Committee on Open Government has seen that their compliance with FOIL requests and with obeying the open meeting laws has been miserable, abysmal. I have a letter from the village attorney on June 13th. It's a reply to a denial of FOIL that I made. I appealed it to the village attorney. On June 13th, he told me that they were working on papers for me. I would have them shortly. I have not received these FOIL requests yet. Now, they just put up meeting minutes from a year ago because I have gone to 6 public meetings in a row, months in a row, and said, why don't we have the meeting minutes from a year ago? July 2012 is still not available for meeting minutes. We just got November. So, yeah, we just got, from April 3rd until now, just went up on the website in a week. They don't do proper public notices. I can tell you that the new zoning regulations, which they just adopted, were not done with proper public notice. They only put the map up on the website the afternoon of the hearing where they approved the zoning. So we have a lot of issues about how our village government is being run. We don't think it's following the proper protocols, and we think that, quite honestly, giving them more power than they already have for us would be pretty much, in our opinion, he's making me, yeah, and not only that, we see no facts whatsoever that would make it necessary for this. We like Bruce and Jane have said, we have a fire district that we pay $600 a year for, which is a huge fire district. We have 3 commissioners. The necessity for armed peace officers through the fire marshal's office is to me a problem. As somebody who has been bullied and intimidated, I go in and even though there was $10,000 given to them by Cablevision over 2.5 years ago to film village meetings, they have not filmed one village meeting. That's $10,000 they got specifically a grant to film village meetings. I have brought it upon myself over the past 8 months to film the village meetings and to put them up on a website. Since I have done that, I have been intimidated, bullied, and harassed by the village and by the village attorney. So I really, really would love for you guys to take what we have to say and really, as far as I'm concerned, let them just live with the New York State laws. And at this point, I don't believe it's necessary. Mostly what they're trying to do is create revenue. They're in debt. They don't have money to run this village. And the way that they're making the money currently is by over-fining and over-permitting the already incredibly poor population. And we would like some type of protection from the state, from this intimidation, from this bullying, and from this use of the codes as a revenue source. We don't feel that the codes and the fees and the permit fees should be used as a revenue source, and that's 100% what they're doing. Thank you very much for giving us this chance to speak.
Thank you for your comments. Today, on this agenda item, we have a request from the Village of Mastic Beach to adjourn or to postpone consideration of the petition until the December 11th, 2013 meeting. That's the request. Are there any questions for Mark that members of the council have? Or Joe? Mr. Hankin?
When a village is formed within a municipality that has some more restrictive local standards, do those more restrictive local standards go to the code in that newly formed village?
Yes,
No.
for 2 years.
For 2 years.
For 2 years.
Yeah, we're on our third year.
And they automatically expire?
Yes, unless
Unless the
the
village does
village has
something
done
else.
something to extend them, or if they do something to repeal them. But
Right.
If they do
Which
nothing,
they
it's
did.
for 2 years.
Thank you.
Okay, answer your question, Mr. Hankin?
Thank you very much.
Okay, are there additional questions from members of the council? Seeing none, we'll take discussion on the request from the Village of Mastic Beach to postpone consideration of the petition to the December 11th meeting. Discussion.
Good question.
Mr. Torpy?
When those two gentlemen showed up here, I think it was 2 meetings ago, and they presented their case, they were not prepared. And at that time, they asked for an extension of time or postponement. What is the usual procedure for people who come, petition the council and consistently don't have preparation and continuously ask for postponements or extensions? Is there any background on that, or does the council have a right to say, look, you can't be on the agenda every one of our meetings, and at the end of the meeting, you're asking for a postponement, a further postponement? That's my question.
Joe, please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's the prerogative of the council to take action on the petition at this time if it feels it is appropriate to do so. In the past, communities have requested additional time or postponement, but I would say that has usually been to a specific meeting that then the council would receive additional information and take an action on. Multiple postponements, I would not necessarily say there's a strong precedent for that. Mayor Kennedy?
When they asked for an additional time, what is the specific thing? They have to prepare what? What is the purpose, to your point? Or is it a stall tactic, or what is the purpose for the additional time?
Mark, do you have some information on that?
Yeah, my recollection of the July meeting is that they didn't ask for more time. I think my recollection is that the Code Council became aware that many of their requests were the same as the town of Brookhaven, and the code council asked if they could provide a comparison, and the code council basically decided to postpone it so that they can provide that information, which they said they were willing to do. That's what I remember.
Who was it, right at the beginning of the meeting that said, they corrected the minutes, and they made the statement?
Mr. Sarwine.
Mr. Sarwine, yes.
And said that, in fact, he found that the uniform code, the correction to uniform code
Already addressed.
the issues.
Correct.
Isn't that what I heard?
Confirm that?
Yes. Well, let me just add something to that. I don't think it addresses all the issues. It might address some of them, but some of the things that I already brought up is that they're requiring all new buildings in excess of 10,000 square feet to have an automatic fire sprinkler system. That is more restrictive than in our uniform code, which usually triggers it at 12,000 square feet, depending on the occupancy of or size of the building. And then the fire alarm system, retroactively in all buildings, that would not be a requirement in the uniform code right now.
Okay. Mr. Sauerwein, would you like to provide any clarification to the correction that you made to the minutes that might help Mayor Kennedy or the council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Pieser. The correction was to my remarks. Okay, that does not mean that the council, that we did not ask for further information from the village of Massachusetts. Just my remarks, and I obviously was not clear when they made them, was that the village should compare their proposal to what exists in the existing New York State Uniform Code, because I felt they would find that many of those additional requirements, which they imported, shall I say, from the Brookhaven Town Code, they're already in place. They're already in effect in the New York State Uniform Code. But that was a correction only to my comments, not to any other section of the minutes or what action or comments were made by other members of the council.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Mayor Kennedy? Thank you.
I have
Mr. Henkin?
One question and one comment. The question is, if I remember the legislation setting up the uniform code, we can't have retroactive requirements. Am I correct or am I incorrect?
You're partially correct. But like any good law,
I'll take 50%.
like any good law, there are many exceptions and what ifs. And that's why I have two hands. On the one hand, on the other hand. The Uniform Code Act says that construction provisions of the Uniform Code cannot be made retroactive to buildings built before 1984. Could the code be made retroactive to buildings built between 1984 and 2003? Probably. Can certain provisions, safety and other provisions of the code, be made applicable to buildings built by Columbus? Yes.
So theoretically, the town could change the definition of habitable space and still comply with Article 18 of the whatever.
They may have some difficulty, not for me to decide, because as I've told this body before, my first name is still not Judge. They may have difficulty applying that provision to buildings built before 1984.
All right, and my comment is, just to remind the council members, and many of you know, because I've said this before, and many of you knew even before I said it, but you were here before me, that when a municipality passes more restrictive local standard, it becomes effective immediately, even before it gets to the council, providing they notify the council in the proper method and so forth. In this particular case, we only agreed, the council, my recollection is, we only agreed to give them the extension to December because they agreed not to enforce any of the regulations, more restrictive local standards, until we met at the December meeting. So I just wanted to make that clear that they agreed not to enforce any of those regulations.
Yes, they did.
Thank you.
I specifically remember.
Additional discussion.
Yes.
Mr. Lightfoot?
Yes, excuse my tiredness, it was slow traffic coming in from Rochester. I would say that, a question and a comment. First question is, the additional information that was asked to be provided to the council, was that additional information provided?
No, it was not.
Okay, my comment here is, this council, I was in on all of those meetings. I agree with my colleague Joe there that they seem to be not prepared for the questions that the council had to them on that day. Looking back at all of the documents that I have read concerning this particular topic, there's been adequate amount of time to provide detailed information concerning this, and I would, my suggestion would be that the council would make a decision on this today and not continue to keep postponing it.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes, sir. I motion that we make a decision on this particular petition, not to postpone.
Mr. Chairman, on that motion?
Okay, can you clarify? I'm going to ask you to clarify your motion. That do you want to take action on the petition, or are you
Yes.
making a motion regarding the postponement?
I'm sorry, let me clarify. I want to take action on the petition, sir.
Okay, and what action are you proposing as part of your motion?
I propose that we deny the petition as it stands now, based on the fact that additional information has not been provided, and that their current restrictions already meet the necessary needs.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion to disapprove the petition. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Before we have a second, we have a comment by our counsel.
I believe technically there are 3 petitions by the village. Three separate petitions.
So we need to make
And
3
so-
separate motions.
Well, I have a reasonable man.
So-
If you'd like to make
Hold on, one at a time, please. We're gonna clarify. There are 3 separate petitions, Mr. Lightfoot. Does your motion encompass all 3 petitions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
A second by Mr. Torpy. We have a motion that's been seconded to disapprove the 3 petitions submitted by the Village of Mastic Beach. Let's take discussion on the motion. Mr. Hankin.
While I agree that the petition should be denied, I don't feel that this is the proper time to do it. First of all, the village is not here to defend their position. Second of all, if I recall, the council did specifically give them till the December 8th meeting to come back.
No, the council gave them to the then scheduled September 11th meeting. And today, or just before the September 11th meeting, we received a letter dated September 6th requesting the council to extend it to the December 11th meeting.
Okay, so I stand corrected. They were supposed to be here at the September meeting that didn't occur because of technical difficulties, at which time we probably would address their September 6th letter. So we are now addressing their September 6th letter. In the context of the September 6th letter, we have this motion.
That's correct. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. At the September, just bringing to your attention the letter that was submitted by the Village of Mastic Beach just prior to the September meeting that did not occur. Their specific request, and I will read it, please allow this letter to serve as a formal request to adjourn our hearing until the next council meeting on December 11th, 2013. The village will continue to not enforce any of the standards until after December 11th, 2013 meeting. That is their specific request. It was not acted on by the council, as you know. Mr. Altieri?
Was there a response to that letter?
No.
Additional discussion?
Question.
Mr. Higbee?
In connection with considering the motion here, could I ask whether the presenters were stating that the provisions of this petition were actually being enforced in the community? I don't remember what I exactly heard, but it seems to me that if they are being enforced, and that's contrary to the motion made by the council at the July hearing, that needs some consideration.
Mark, do you have any information that might help answer that question?
I don't. I don't know if they were enforcing the code or the more restrictive local standard prior to the July 16th meeting. I don't think we have any information on whether they were doing so or not.
I mean,
they agreed not to enforce the more restrictive local standards between July 16th and September 11th. I don't know one way or the other if they've been enforcing it or not.
This is Gary again. I was referring specifically to after that meeting and whether any of the comments from presenters today were stating that they in fact were enforcing this petition between July and the present day.
Yes.
As the maker of the motion, I'll clarify that I was not saying that they were enforcing any of these restrictive codes. What I was agreeing with, all of the information that I've read up until this point in time, as well as agreeing with some of the speakers, that the existing things that they have in place concerning their needs, I believe, are being met under the current conditions. So to clarify, I was not saying that they were enforcing these restrictive codes.
Does that help, Mr. Higbee?
No, my question was directed towards the presenters who presented during the general comment period. It seemed to me I recall a comment saying that they were enforcing this code. My question was, were they enforcing it since the July date or not? The reason for asking that, of course, is that would be contrary to their statement in their September 6th letter and the action by the council in July.
You want to speak on that? Mr.
Review
Higbee,
what the comments were.
Mr. Higbee, there was a comment that was made that suggested that that some of the provisions of this local law might be currently enforced by the Village of Mastic Beach. It is a comment that was made. Unfortunately, at this particular time, we do not have the ability to confirm that, since the Village of Mastic Beach is not. The only thing that we know, and we're going to have to make a decision on the motion based upon this information, is that the Village of Mastic Beach has indicated it would not enforce the provisions of the more restrictive local standard, and a presenter of a comment today not representing the Village of Mastic Beach has indicated that some of those provisions actually may be under enforcement at this time. So we're going to have to base our decision on that seemingly conflicting information.
I understand.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, I understand.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hankin?
Was the village notified of today's meeting and that their September 6th letter would be discussed at this meeting, because we didn't have the September meeting?
Can you answer that?
I can't definitively tell you whether we formally wrote them, but we have had numerous discussions with the people from the village in terms of what had occurred and going forward.
And I knew about the meeting today.
And it is public knowledge, it's posted on the website, etc.
It's our policy to do that. I can't actually remember back a couple weeks ago if that was actually, if we made a call or sent an email or not.
When
Mayor Kennedy?
Question. Because I have been in and out doing some other things. When this meeting was announced, this agenda item that we were going to discuss this was on the agenda items? This is a listed agenda item.
Yes.
They would have received that information, correct? Because I'm asking the same kind of thing here. They're not here, and my question is, why aren't they here if this is to be voted on today? It puzzles me.
I don't think we sent them an agenda item. I can't remember if we contacted them. Usually it's an informal thing that we do when we know that they have something on the agenda. But we certainly didn't send them the agenda itself for this meeting.
So it went through public notice.
Right.
There's a likelihood that they did not receive a specific formal correspondence from our office regarding the postponement of the meeting to this date.
Correct. But they were informed of the meeting before September 11th. That didn't happen.
Mr. Henkin?
My recollection, and I was here in Albany, I wasn't in New York City, that nobody from the Village of Mastic Beach showed up at the September 11th meeting here in Albany. If I'm correct. I don't know whether they showed up at the New York meeting. I'm sure they didn't show up in Buffalo. So.
Mike, do you have a comment?
Well, Mr. Hankin, that's true, but they had requested the postponement, so their thought was, in their defense, that it would be requested and honored, if you will, at that September meeting. That's why they didn't show.
I understand their thinking, but they didn't come to protect themselves just in case we didn't give them the postponement.
Absolutely.
That was the point I wanted to make, that therefore, I don't feel bad about them not being here because they weren't here at the meeting at which they officially requested.
Okay, thank you. Additional discussion, we have a motion to disapprove the 3 petitions from the Village of Mastic Beach. It has been seconded. Taking continued discussion on that motion. Mayor Kennedy.
Not so much a question, but an observation in terms of the information currently presented and the information during open input. At this point, I don't see any justification for the additional requirement, for the additional restrictive codes. It appears that our uniform code, the national uniform, or the New York Uniform Code, covers the needs of the village as it now stands. I haven't seen any documentation that says they need more. What they brought in July, I didn't see it in July, and I don't see it yet.
Okay. Additional discussion. Joe, did you have a? Oh, excuse me, Mr. Vatter.
It was just something that had been eating at me with this, and I just had to double check it. There's no analysis here whatsoever of their code versus Brookhaven versus the state code versus anything.
Which Mr. Sawan is.
Which was his point.
That's right.
But going out of the gate, the whole thing is, fails on any kind of sufficiency of one of the elements you need to establish in order to get a more restrictive ruling. Am I pushing this too hard? But
I don't want to speak to that, but I would mention this, that the reason that I believe the Village of Mastic passed these laws in the first place was, until 3 years ago, the Village of Mastic was part of the town of Brookhaven. The town of Brookhaven previously adopted and had approved a series of more restrictive local standards. Those standards applied within the village. They applied within the village after the village was incorporated. In order to continue what had been applicable in the village has to now adopt and get approved its own more restrictive local standards. My memory, which is very feeble, is that at the original meeting when this topic, these petitions were considered, really 2 things were asked for. One is to compare the village's more restrictive local standards with the existing more restrictive local standards of the town. To see, are you changing them, making them bigger, less, what are you doing? And second, to compare the village's more restrictive local standards with the current version, current requirements of the Uniform Code. So the Code Council, with that information, would be able to determine what change are we really making? What change is the village really asking for? And the village is apparently attempting to get that information. They had promised to present it at the September meeting. Before the September meeting, they submitted a letter requesting a further extension until the December meeting, and they made another promise in the letter, in writing, not to enforce their more restrictive local standards pending the December 11th meeting.
Does that help?
Yeah, maybe it's a conversation offline, just for my own clarification. My attorney training said, didn't meet the elements, toss it out on its face.
Well, another point I will present is that I do not believe that during the meeting that we held in July, there was any discussion or any consensus among the council at that time that the Village of Mastic Beach had presented an argument for the presence of special conditions that warranted the approval of a more restrictive standard. And that was one of the reasons that additional information was requested, because again, by statute, we have to determine first and foremost if the provisions being requested are in fact more restrictive than the Uniform Code, and if so, do they meet accepted engineering practices, and are there special conditions that exist within the community to warrant the Code Council's approval of those standards. So I believe, at this point, I do not believe any of that information has been received or certainly confirmed by the council. Additional discussion. Seeing no,
New York, John.
is that Mr. Lee?
Yes, thank you, Ron. I just have a question. Is it, please correct me if my understanding is off here, that a local jurisdiction has the right to pass a more restrictive local standard and enforce the local standard until the petition for having a more restrictive local standard is denied by this council? Is that correct?
That is correct.
But in this case, the Village of Mastic has voluntarily said they would not enforce this more restrictive local standard, which otherwise they could, given that they have a petition in motion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So then, by voting in favor of the motion on the floor to disapprove this petition, does that then prohibit them from ever pursuing a similar, more restrictive local standard again, or is this petition could come back to this council?
It is simply an action on this petition. It is a prerogative of the community to pursue the development and the passage of another more restrictive local standard in the future, but they would have to go through the process again, resubmit, and then petition the Code Council for approval.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you. Additional discussion? Seeing none, we're going to take a roll call vote on the motion to deny.
Ron Peaster,
Yes.
Maria Gazzotti,
Yes.
John Lee,
Yes.
Nicholas Altieri,
Yes.
Judith Kennedy,
Yes.
Willie Lightfoot,
Yes.
William Tucker,
Yes.
Gary Higbee,
Yes.
John Flanagan,
Yes.
Robert Hankin,
Yes.
Joseph Sauerwein,
No.
John Torpy,
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries, the petition is disapproved. Thank you. Next, more restrictive local standards petition, Town of Bedford, local law number 3 of 2013. Mark, do we have any representatives from the Town of Bedford here?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, then would you please present the petition?
Okay, this is the town's more restrictive local standard to enhance fire alarm system and requirements of truss construction signage requirements. This local law was adopted on June 18th. We received the petition from the town on August 16th, which was far more than 30 days beyond the limit of the requirement of the executive law. In addition, the petition was not submitted by the chief executive officer. Staff informed the town of what we saw as these difficulties, as well as what we felt were some deficiencies in the petition with respect to the special local conditions. The town attorney informed us then of their intent to repeal the local law at the future town meeting of September 3rd, and then try again, reenact it at a later date. We did receive an email from the town attorney on September 12th that to inform us that the town did repeal the local law number 3 of 2013 at their September 3rd meeting. But we haven't heard from the town since. We haven't received any formal withdrawal of their petition, and it's just left at that. The highlights of the local law is that they're requiring for all new commercial construction a fire detection system, and they're requiring for truss signage requirements for all new buildings and additions for residential and commercial use. The way it is more restrictive than what we already have in our code for the truss requirements anyway, is that, at least my reading is that it also includes truss signage requirements for 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses. That's it.
Okay. So we have a petition that was again originally submitted by the town of Bedford. According to a verbal accounting from the town of Bedford, it has been repealed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But we have not received written confirmation of the repeal.
And we received that from the town attorney, not from the town supervisor.
So the question is, what does the council want to take any action on this petition today or at this time? And so, Joe, do you have any comments that you'd like to present regarding the council's either obligation or options or action today? I think that might be helpful.
I had a good answer to that. The email that was received from the town attorney said that I'm writing to advise you that town board revoked local law number 3 at a town board meeting on September 3rd. The town will be reconsidering the local law, and we will resubmit the petition to your office in compliance with your instructions. And I think the implication of this letter is that the town has withdrawn its original petition, and they'll get back to us if and when they feel it's appropriate to proceed. So the code council might consider, if it wishes to take any action, to deem the petition withdrawn, or to deem the petition moot, and to take no action on the petition.
Okay. Does that help everyone to understand where we are with this situation with the town of Bedford? Does anybody have any questions for Joe or on the item that's before us right now? Okay, is there any action that the code council would like to take or discussion? Mr. Hankin?
Could we possibly ask the town, I don't suggest we do anything at this point in time we consider it moot, but just as a backup, could we ask the town for a copy of the minutes in which they withdraw so that we have it in our file rather than an email from the attorney?
Okay,
Or a
we'll,
letter from the supervisor, you know, something more official than an email from the attorney.
that's a good point. We'll make sure to do that. Okay, Mayor
I'm
Kennedy?
not sure of the language, but given that they filed 30 days, after the 30-day time limit, given that we have a communication from them saying they have repealed the law and would reapply it another time, for this particular request, I make a motion that we, I guess, deem it moot or that we reject it. Which way would you do with that?
It sounds like what you're suggesting is that we would deem it to be moot at this point.
And put it in the dead letter box or whatever.
Okay.
I make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Kennedy. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Mr. Hankin. We have a motion that has been seconded to deem the petition from the town of Bedford as moot. Let's take discussion on the motion. Mr. Sauerwein, I think that's your hand.
Yes, it is, sir.
Thank you.
I understand that they have withdrawn their petition. Is that correct?
According to their to the email that they sent to us.
I don't mean to be nitpicking, but what are we voting on? I mean, we're voting on something that isn't even before us anymore. That's my opinion. I don't think it's necessary for us to deny it or deem it moot. I don't think we can deny it if they have said they withdraw it. And I just think it's not necessary to take any action.
You are correct. This is not a motion to deny the petition. This is just considering the circumstances that we are faced with, which is not a lot of clarity with respect to the town's actions on either the last petition or a future petition. This is essentially just to send a message to the town of Bedford that we do not consider that petition to have any status, and if they want to come back to us, they're going to have to start over. That's essentially what the effect of approving this motion would be.
Thank you.
Okay? Let's take additional discussion on the motion. Seeing none, we're going to take a voice vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed?
I
Motion
abstain,
carried.
sir.
And an abstention by Mr. Sauerwein.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, agenda item number 5, next Uniform Code and Energy Code update. As you know, we are still in development of the rulemaking documents for the Uniform Code, and we'll be bringing back to you, we're hoping at the December meeting, but we're still working on this. The final report of the Residential Code Technical Subcommittee, along with a report of the Fire Code Technical Subcommittee on gas station fire suppression systems. Those are the two outstanding items with respect to the Uniform Code rulemaking proposal that we need to bring before you and get some direction from the council. With respect to the Energy Code update, again, that is in 2 parts. You've already endorsed rulemaking documents for the commercial energy code provisions, specifically focused on ASHRAE 90.1, updating to the 2010 edition, that we are waiting for one final report from the Pacific Northwest Laboratory that is critical to the rulemaking documents before we send that rulemaking package over to the governor's office for pre-publication review. At the same time that we have been waiting for that report, we have reached the point where we are going to miss the deadline established by the U.S. Department of Energy for updating the commercial provisions of our energy code. That deadline is, correct me if I'm wrong, October 18th of this year, so that's just a few days away. We have submitted a request, a formal request, to the U.S. Department of Energy for an extension, and we have not yet received a response, but we are in contact with DOE on. They know that we have sent the request for an extension, and we are hopeful to receive an affirmative response from them in the near future, and we'll certainly let you know once we have that. The residential provisions of the energy code are part of the rest. The uniform are coupled with the uniform code rulemaking package that will hopefully go into public comment sometime in the relatively near future. So that essentially is a 30,000-foot overview of where we are with the two rulemaking packages. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Lee?
I have two questions. The first is, when do you anticipate the PNNL report to be submitted? And the second is, the request for extension gives us time till when?
We were expecting the PNNL report to be issued and have it in hand in June of this year. So we've been anxiously awaiting the receipt of that report. We've been told by DOE that it is going through the final stages of approval so that it can be released. But frankly, we're not exactly sure when we're going to receive that. We're hopeful we'll receive it soon, but we were hopeful we would receive it by June. So we don't have a definitive answer on that. And I'm trying to remember if there was a specific time frame that we requested an extension for.
The letter requested an extension till 6 months past the date of receipt of the PNNL report. A very, very preliminary response from the Department of Energy was to suggest a flat 9-month extension.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Lee?
The follow-up question then is, first on the PNNL report, is there a draft that is available for us to review? And the second one is, if the DOE submits grants an extension for a flat 9 months, and the PNNL report is still not available at that time, what are the consequences of that? Is there a possibility for another extension?
On the first question, the draft report, I do not believe they have released a draft report. I know that we had seen or reviewed some preliminary information. This was either early this year or maybe last year that might be contained in this report, but we do not know. We can't definitively say what is going to be contained in this report. We do not have a draft report in our possession. Regarding the extension and the 9-month or 6 month after release of the report, frankly, that's why we requested the 6 months after the release of the report. Receiving a 9-month extension and knowing that we still don't have that report is of concern to us. However, we are in communication with the Department of Energy currently, hoping to resolve that issue in the very near future. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions?
I'm going to ask if there's going to be a public comment.
One thing, just and Mark, I want to make sure that we write this down. As soon as we do receive the PNNL report from the Department of Energy, then we will notify the council in writing by email, just so that you are aware that we have this report. We will also inform you of the results of our request for an extension and what ultimately occurs with respect to our request. Okay? All right. Future meetings, Mark. Let's just review the next meeting, which I believe is December 11th.
The next meeting is December 11th. Between now and December 11th, we will establish 4 meeting dates for 2014. I will email the Code Council members what those dates are for further discussion at the December 11th meeting.
Okay. Thank you. And finally, is there any other business council would like to bring forward today? Okay, Mark, you have 2 items.
Okay, the first one, I just don't want to forget, because I probably will, is that if anybody's here receiving training credits and you need to sign up on the sheet that we have outside the hallway in order to receive those credits. The other item, at the July meeting of the Code Council, there was a topic that was briefly discussed at the end, brought up by Mr. Hankin, having to do with the Department of State Division of Licensing Services with regard to licensing requirements for fire alarm installers. The discussion was really more specific to installing smoke alarms and what the role of an electrician is, what the role of the homeowner is. Can the homeowner install their own smoke alarm system? Can the electrician do it? The answers that we had that time was that anyone doing that work would have to be licensed by the Division of Licensing Services. And at the end of that discussion, I was asked to look into it and follow up, and that's what I'm doing right now. I got all my information on the Division of Licensing Services website. They have a 13-page pamphlet available there that identifies the general business law that initiates this requirement and their regulations for it. And they also have question and answers topic on their pamphlet. So I'm reporting to you my reading of that. I didn't speak to anyone in Division of Licensing Services because I did once before the July meeting, and I was told that smoke alarm installers did have to be licensed. But what I did find out on the website is to answer, number one, the question about whether a homeowner has to be licensed or whether they can do it. And the answer I got in reading this is that they in fact can install their own smoke alarms. And the reason is because in doing so, they're not actually in the business of installing fire alarm systems. They're just doing it for themselves. The same question goes to the owner of a business, commercial business owner, whether they can do it. And the answer that I got reading that is that they can. In fact, I think the question was asked and answered whether an employee of that business can do it, and the answer was that they could. Again, but because they're not in the business of installing fire alarm systems. We also talked at the last meeting about the electrical inspectors, or excuse me, electricians, licensed locally or not licensed locally. Mr. Hankin brought up the question as to whether a licensed electrician who can bring all the wiring up to the smoke alarm, but they're not licensed to make those final connections. And the answer to that is a little bit mixed. If an electrician is licensed locally, my reading of the pamphlet is that they do not have to be licensed to make that final connection. They do have to register with the Division of Licensing Services. So, and I assume in that process they would have to show that they are in fact licensed locally, but so that their name is on the list of individuals that can do this without a license. If an electrician, if there's no licensing requirement locally for electricians, electricians would have to be licensed to install a fire alarm system, or in this case the smoke alarms, if they wanted to make that final connection like Mr. Hankin had brought up last time. And lastly, just to reinforce, if it wasn't known before that, is that this does not apply to battery-operated smoke alarms. That was also on that website. So if anybody wants to confirm that, I encourage you to check the website out and look it up yourself, because I don't want to be the one interpreting what the law says, ever.
Sending your name in.
Any comments or questions for Mark? Mr. Henkin?
The only comment I have is, what I understand, the final connection, as Mark explained, it's not electrical. The electrician hooks up the final wire. It's putting the 2 screws in that fasten the smoke detector to the box. So it's not wiring. The final connection is not an electrical connection. It's a question of the boxes in the ceiling or in the wall, and the smoke detector is hanging there on the wires. Somebody has to come in and put 2 screws in, and that's where the license is required to put those 2 screws in. I just wanted to make that clear to all the members of the council so you understand what we're talking about.
And that question, I did speak to someone in Division of Licensing Services, and that the answer I received was that they really, technically, they had to be licensed to do that.
Put the 2 screws in.
Yeah.
Who makes rules like this?
The Department of State.
Really, I'm serious. Who makes rules like
This
this?
is a licensure requirement falls under the Department of State.
Which division?
Let's talk offline.
I lost New York City, so could we please check with them? I mean, in Buffalo, could we please check with them if there's any comments? Could they speak up? I can't seem to get them back.
All right, are there any additional comments from New York City or Buffalo?
Any comment?
No.
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 No Buffalo.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other business for today? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Have a nice day, everyone.